I don't know how well you know the story of Esther that we find in the Old Testament. If you've not read it or not read it for a while, do have a look afterwards and read the story for yourself. I want to pick up the point where a young Jewish girl, Esther, has been chosen to be the next queen of Persia. It's interesting to note that God is not mentioned at all in this book. And it's led some theologians over the centuries to say, well, surely it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be part of our canon of Scripture. But I believe it's there for one important reason: to show that God's love and God's sovereignty is present at all times and in all situations. God may not be mentioned, but there are lots of coincidences. We might call them God incidences. For example, it was a usual practice to choose a new queen from one of the 7 most important families in Persia. It just so happened that Esther, a young Jewish girl, was chosen. She'd been brought up by her uncle Mordecai, and he lived and worked at the palace. And it just so happened that he discovered a plot to assassinate the king. He told Esther, Esther told the king. His life was saved. Haman was a leading Persian official, and he managed to trick the king into signing a decree which would have resulted in the extermination of the Jewish race throughout the empire. Mordecai persuaded Esther that she needed to go and talk to the king about this. But there's a problem. You only were allowed to go to the king if he invited you, if he held out his golden scepter. To do so without that approval meant death. And Esther hadn't been called for some 30 days. So she asked her people to pray for her and to fast for 3 days. And after that time she said, I'll go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. And it just so happened that the king held out his golden scepter. And, well, again, you can find the rest of the story for yourself. Even today, the Jews hold an annual festival, the Feast of Purim, to celebrate this great event. And one theologian has commented, what is at stake in the story of Esther is no less than the salvation of the world. It's such an important historical story. Well, I could go on, but the point I'm trying to make is that despite what it looked like, God was at work. So to our present COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know about you, but I've really had enough of it and feeling quite miserable at times. So where is God at work in all this? Did God send it as a punishment for the world? Or is God trying to say something that we need to listen to? Well, they're big questions, and I'm not going to try to answer them today. We'll have to leave that for another occasion. But for now, just let's be clear. Our God is not a distant and a remote God. Our God isn't just sitting back and allowing this to happen. He is involved. God is at work, and for many it's unseen and unacknowledged ways. But our God is almighty. Our God really does have the whole world in his hands. May the story of Esther be both a comfort and encouragement to each and every one of us at this challenging time. Thanks for listening.